third for setting a screen.
Because of physical play, although Jordan Taylor just got caught with a moving screen. Izzo's dying for a moving screen.
It's that dreaded moving screen.
Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Moving Screen Podcast. I'm Brendan Quinn with The Athletic, here with Dylan Burkhart, UM Hoops. It is late evening, Sunday. Michigan State 70, Michigan 64. Spartans punching their ticket for the NCAA tournament. Michigan with a long ride home from East Lansing, and the loss being very much secondary in this one. Much bigger questions surrounding Eli Brooks. Dylan, how you doing, pal?
I'm good. I cannot complain. Knocking this late night podcast out. It's been a while since I feel like we did one of these late night pods. It's going to be a fun time.
We both have alcohol by our sides, I think, here. So these are usually the best episodes.
Rounding into March form.
Yes, I have filed my story, and now it's time to discuss. Let's just start right off the bat with biggest difference, right? The big question was game one and game two. Weird rivalry doubleheader deal here. Your biggest differences, game one to game two.
First thing that's kind of funny is I feel like I'll say something smart and then slowly convince myself into something stupid. When we talked about this series earlier in the week, I said that they'll split and that Michigan will win the first one and Michigan State will win the second one. Then we actually do the podcast after the first game, and I'm like, oh, well, no way, Michigan's going to win. But in the end, it turned out, I think, kind of how we saw it could go this week, right? The circumstances just really led to just a tricky spot all around for Michigan, and a spot where Michigan State just had to play better the second time around, and they got the job done, mostly because Rocket Watts and Aaron Henry played really well, and they didn't play really well in the first game. And I guess Rocket Watts didn't even play for the last 17 minutes of the first game.
Yeah, I mean, interesting thing, like on Izzo's post-game Zoom, I asked him what he was happiest about in terms of adjustments made from, the original game plan and changes you wanted to make game over game and blah, blah, blah. And I cited defense, right? Obviously did a much better job on Franz Wagner, did a better job on Dickinson, really held Michigan to one of its roughest performances of the year. And he immediately was like, well, I'd point to the offense, and I wouldn't argue it, but that kind of speaks to a much better game on both sides of the court. I thought Michigan State's defense was much better, but the fact that you had some co-collaborators with Henry for once, not for once, I shouldn't say that, but as opposed to the last game against Michigan, to get a 20-point scorer alongside Henry, it felt like watching a different basketball team. And Joey Hauser's first half was enormous. So, getting stuff out of guys offensively really seemed to, not surprisingly, make things a little bit more comfortable for a basketball team.
So did you think Michigan State did anything notably different offensively than the first game?
I thought it was a lot less one-on-one isolation stuff for Aaron Henry. They were playing more team offense, and a lot of it was, they ran some of those curls for Watts in the first game, right, and getting him those kind of elbow free throw line jumpers, and he got looks on them a couple times in the first game. This game, they just kind of leaned into it and at least dispersed some of their offensive looks amongst that, and just kind of putting Henry on an island or trying to switch him into the best matchup possible, right?
Yeah, for me, it seems more like playing better than playing differently, right? Michigan State still shot a bunch of other twos. They shot 30 other twos in both games. They shot 33% in the first game, 47% in this game. That's basically the difference in the game.
That in the threes, 0 for 9 in the first one, 4 for 11 in the second one. They won by 6. There you go.
Yeah, but it wasn't like they just came out bombing threes, right? They shot a similar number.
No.
Of threes.
I'm saying your point is right. Playing better means making shots too. Like, and you don't make shots, or you do make shots. In this game, 4 threes versus 0 threes.
That's can't argue with that logic if you're going to throw that out there. I still think the bigger change in this game was that Michigan State's defense Michigan's offense never really was able to string 4, 5, or 6 good possessions in a row together. And because they were never able to really get into gear in that sense, Michigan State's offense was very much bit by bit, right? There was never a big streak for Michigan State either. I don't like that I can remember. Not like a 12-0 run or anything like that, really. It was more of they just scored every possession a little more efficiently than Michigan did. And Michigan is really a team that, like, the first game changed on a big 10-0 run or whatever it was right at that point in the second half when the game kind of spiraled out of control. I think Michigan State's defense did a really good job of, they never led up to give up any of those easy possessions, right? Like, it takes 2 tough shots and then a couple easy shots, and all of a sudden the game's blown open. Michigan State made it so Michigan had to get a tough shot every time down the court, and that really just prevented Michigan from ever getting any momentum, and it kept the game exactly how Michigan State wanted to play it, right? It was a game of just keep executing, and get the job done, and that's exactly what they did.
It's probably not a coincidence that 2 of Michigan's 3 worst offensive games of the year were essentially without Eli Brooks. But what difference? I feel like a casual viewer, casual watcher will just kind of look at Eli Brooks' offensive numbers and say, hey, couldn't have made that big of a difference, right? But, anyone who watches this team, it's pretty abundantly clear. He is, in terms of cohesiveness, in terms of kind of that, the ball moving, the offense having flow, the offense kind of having that rhythm. I mean, he is such a kind of pacemaker to things. Just how would you kind of describe the difference without him tonight for them?
Yeah, the crazy thing about it is I don't even know, like, you could say his absence hurt Michigan more on defense than offense.
Right.
Rocket Watts doesn't go and get all those buckets against, like, they're clearly picking on Mike Smith defensively and just putting him in one-on-one. I like pick and roll, put Mike Smith in it, and then shoot over him. And he had a size advantage, and he hit shot after shot after shot. In another world, Michigan could just put Eli Brooks in that spot to try to negate that and go along that path. So I think defensively it makes a big impact. Offensively, I think the biggest change is, well, like, there's the obvious, right? You're playing Zeb Jackson for 8 minutes. You're not, like, your rotation's thrown out of whack. But beyond that, it's more like Eli Brooks picks up assists within the flow of things. And Shawnee Brown, offensively, he catches the ball, he's going to drive the ball, or he's going to shoot the ball, right? He doesn't give you the next pass flow that Eli Brooks gives you. And I think you do lose some of that, right? And Shawnee Brown had a couple, probably his best drives of the season almost, when he had good takes. He hit a couple threes in this. He was like 2 of 6, I think, but he's kind of a possession ender all the time. And Eli Brooks is a guy who, when the ball finds him, it can find something better. And I think that's what you miss with Eli Brooks out of the lineup. And that could be a huge issue for Michigan moving forward.
Yeah, we'll touch on that right on the back end here where we get into the Big Ten tournament and the postseason and blah, blah, blah.
So I didn't see the entire Michigan State press conference. So Rocket Watts plays 32 minutes. How much of it, and takes 16 shots? Like, shouldn't Rocket Watts have been playing a lot of minutes all along? Like, why, like, was it a master long con to bench him for the entire second half in the first game so that he would play like this now? Is it just he figured it out? What do you make of this?
These 2 games are his entire season.
What do you mean?
That it's completely enigmatic. It's completely inconsistent.
Oh, I got you.
And yeah, he goes in today and he makes shots that he sometimes misses. I mean, the guy has been shooting 29% for the last 21 games before this.
But he just went and shot, 65% on 21% shots and won on the game.
So he made a bunch of shots today. I did think he was more under control today. He took a couple shots that, they wanted back. But it's the same thing, like a month ago, whatever, he'd have a decent game and Izzo would say, and he took a couple bad shots and he came in and he owned it. And that shows growth. And then the next game he does something dumb and gets benched for 15 minutes. And I don't know. What does this mean for the postseason? If anyone is like, okay, this has been figured out for Rocket for the postseason, I think you're out of your mind.
That's not what I'm saying. Here's what I'm saying. We did a podcast on whatever day it was, Friday. Mm-hmm. And we were like, what could possibly change? And the only thing we come up with is Rocket and Hauser have to play more and play better, right? That was what we said. But when you sit and think about that, why are they not playing more? If they're the only, we're literally going down the lineup. AJ Hogarth, he's not going to give you 15. Right. Any of these other guys, they don't really trust them at all. So then you put the two guys who can do it, and maybe they're not going to do it every game, but what's AJ Hogarth giving you? First of all, starting AJ Hogarth at point guard and saying Rocket Watts is going to play all the two, and then he plays basically all your minutes at point guard. I can't really figure out the logic behind some of the lineup decisions and rotations. And I feel like what if you would, I just feel like they almost quit on Rocket too early. I don't know. I can't make sense of it all.
Something that I wrote in the story that I just filed is that one of the great ironies in this whole thing is that because of the situation Michigan State was in, and because of the situation that it's going to result in with another NCAA tournament appearance, the streak continues, blah, blah, blah. This will be seen as a masterful coaching job by Izzo to salvage the season and find a way to the NCAA tournament. Whereas in reality, this has been, I think, a struggle-filled coaching performance. I don't think they've ever really found what they're supposed to be. And Rocket Watts is the prime example of that all season long with this, that they just haven't been able to figure it out. That's the reality of it. That is a truth. So I agree with you. And I'm not going to sit here and I can't sit here and explain things this was the 16th starting lineup change of the season from the previous game. That's insane.
In a 26-game season.
And it's not a team that's been riddled up and down with injuries, right? There was COVID and that did dictate some lineups, blah, blah, blah. But for the most part, this has just been
13 lineups.
No, they from game over game, they've changed their starting lineup 16 times.
But 13 unique lineups.
Yes. So that just speaks to it's always just felt like you're throwing darts, doesn't it? And and Rocket,
you're throwing so many darts that
I'm not doing anything.
They're not.
I'm with you. I'm being
playing the wrong
here.
Hands almost, right? There's only so many hands with this roster that can be great. And I feel like they went for too many lineups that maybe could have been okay, or maybe could have been, I don't know. There's a lot of players that are playing a lot of minutes that just didn't have the upside. And why are you I think it was pretty clear watching that last game that Watts was effective in his spots and he was getting downhill. It made sense to go to him. But at the same time, if Joshua Langford doesn't get in foul trouble, does Watts play as much in this game? And that's one of the things. It's the same thing you could say for the last game. If Austin Davis doesn't get in foul trouble, does Brandon Johns change that game late in the second half? It's almost like sometimes foul trouble saves coaches over their own weird lineup ticks.
Marcus Bingham's another prime example of this.
Mm-hmm.
Marcus Bingham should be playing more. And it's not only what you see on the court, the numbers spell it out too. If you look at offensive point possession, defensive points per possession with him on off, it all adds up to that says that he should be playing more. And this game was a perfect example of it. He had, Michigan State, one of the big keys in this game was what they did on the glass. And Bingham was right in the middle of all of it, grabbing 8 boards, had a few huge offensive rebounds. How about the fact that he goes up with a one-on-one? What was it, 4 minutes left? It was a huge spot. He bangs both of them. he's just a guy, like, it's the same thing with Watts, where, like, he might do shit that drives you crazy, but his upside for what he can deliver is just clearly superior to the other options.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, there's just the level of patience that it takes that, like, Izzo, God bless the guy, and he's about to go to his 24th straight NCAA tournament. He's got 9 Final Fours, so what the hell do we know? But, like, that, I feel like it's hard to ignore that this is probably the reality of it, and they find a way. And there's probably a reason that they find it out late in the year, too.
Yeah, and also take a step back. I think everyone agrees this team isn't actually very good, and they also just beat 3 top 5 teams in the last 3 weeks of the season to make the tournament. So that says something about something, and it's a really impressive the way they maneuvered this down the stretch. Even like, and it took some bloodbaths at home. Some of these games, they weren't pretty games, a lot of them, but they figured out a way to win games and get the job done. I think free throw shooting in this game was a big swing point. Michigan State, they foul more than anyone in the Big Ten. Michigan fouls, I think, second fewest free throws per game, or free throws per 100 attempts. And Michigan State got to the line more often. Michigan also, some of that was its own doing as far as missing front ends of one-on-ones. Like those are plays that really change games, especially in this kind of game. And you can't get in the bonus with, I think there was like 8 or 9 minutes left in the second half. Michigan got in the bonus and missed those 2 front ends. That, like, those are the missed opportunities that on the margins have really helped Michigan State in this run down the stretch, right? Like Illinois missed a lot of free throws, and figuring out a way to just gut games out and execute them, I think is definitely a win for Michigan State.
The Josh Langford shot, can we talk about that?
Yeah, what part of it?
I didn't think that there was any chance in hell that thing was going in when he put it up there. But when it fell, that was one of those shots where you're like, there's something about college basketball that shot goes in, that the 5th-year senior makes that shot, because he has the personal foul before that. He has a turnover on the possession before that. Like if Langford was going to be the kind of dog in them blowing that win, that would have just been a complete miscarriage of justice. And he goes out there and he hits that shot, and I thought that was pretty awesome.
It was definitely poetic with everything he's been through in his career. He's also never really played a good game against Michigan his whole career. So that was a big shot to hit. We have to talk about the other side of that shot, though, which is Michigan just going 2-3 zone down the stretch, which I didn't really understand as a strategic decision. I know Hunter Dickinson was in foul trouble and Mike Smith was struggling, but Michigan State had pretty much figured out the zone over 2 games. And I know they turned over that last possession before it, but it just seemed like what makes Michigan good is its man-to-man defense. And I feel like you're getting too cute when you're trying to go 2-3 zone in a 1 possession, 2 possession, whatever it was. I think it was down to 1 possession at that point, and you just are going to play your 2-3 zone. I don't know. I thought that was a questionable decision.
At the time, I was thinking the same thing. Like, this doesn't make a lot of sense. And then the only real rationale I could come up for it was that they just weren't trusting defense without Brooks out there, and that they were almost just out of fear of not having him, because they're seeing things happening. Like, this is the coaching mindset. You're seeing things happening and you're like, God damn it. If Eli were out there, this and this and this wouldn't happen. So now you start getting frazzled and you're like, fuck it, let's just go to a zone. Right. And maybe that makes up for this absence. That's because I agree with you. I didn't get it, but
that was something we talked about in the last pod. We said Michigan State, and then I think tonight they had 9 points on 5 possessions against zone. It's too cute. And literally every time out, Michigan just plays their zone. At this point, coaches are just calling a zone play coming out of a timeout, right? So you kind of lost some of the surprise factor with that. Like, it used to work maybe in January and it would catch people off guard, but now it's just kind of in the game plan. I also thought that play also symbolized another thing we've talked about all year with Michigan. Sean D. Brown just tends to kind of fall asleep a little bit too much on the ball defensively and will give up catch and shoot threes in key spots. And a lot of times it's been in a 12-point game or whatever, so it doesn't matter. But that one was a big one. And it was kind of like in the perfect spot as far as between, couldn't tell if it was Franz bumping up that needed to happen or Sean D getting over, but he was pretty far sunk in, and then you give up a three to one of the two players on Michigan State's team that can make catch and shoot threes regularly, right? So I thought that kind of symbolizes just what went wrong with Michigan, where they didn't really hit on anything, right? Like, what did Michigan do well in that game? And it's credit to Michigan State, but they didn't do much of anything well for more than bits and pieces of like 2 or 3 possessions at a time.
Sean D, really only dude on the team that you'd probably say had a good game.
And I don't know, Mike Smith. I don't think Sean D had a particularly great game. Would you say he did?
He gave him something. He gave him scoring when they desperately needed it. So give him credit for that. And I thought Mike Smith defensively was
bad. Obviously, like Mike Smith was a huge problem defensively, but Mike Smith assisted or scored half of Michigan's baskets, and Michigan shot 2 of 12 on his ball screen passes. So that's the problem, is he was finding guys and they didn't hit shots. And I think that's what you lost as far as your effectiveness offensively.
What did you make of Wagner and Livers? This is kind of the first time in a while that you just saw both play poorly, do, whatever, just lack of effectiveness overall.
You got to mute your phone, man.
I'm a very popular man.
I think Franz really, it was just a struggle for him to finish. He was 2 of 7 on twos. And right. I think Malik Hall did a really good job of defending him at the rim. Like most of his misses at the rim, Malik Hall was kind of walling him up there. And credit to Malik Hall, because that's usually those driving right-hand scoops and hooks are basically what Franz does as far as scoring. And he's shooting like 60, 65% around the rim, and missing those, I think, just kind of threw him off his game a little bit. You look at his 3 turnovers trying to force the ball in the post, like that's fine. But at the same time, most of his assists were those same passes. They just worked. So it was just, I think he was it was a good job by Michigan State trying to take away those passes into the post. And I think really Michigan just needs to come up with more creative ways to get Hunter Dickinson the ball on the move, right? Everything's so stationary, I think, when they're trying to force it into him, and it's not quick enough. There's not enough movement. Because his key, like Dickinson's key, is catching the ball where he has already created an advantage, and like his advantage has to be in his positioning on the catch. He's not just going to be able to bully his way into the paint and get to his move every time. That's fine, maybe once or twice, but it's not going to be your every possession thing. And so I'd have to go back and look closer, but I think Franz had some of Michigan's best moments late in the game. He just didn't make the right reads on a few ball screens and then missed 2 or 3 shots he usually makes because of good defense, and that's how you have a bad game. So I don't make of it any huge thing as far as his struggles.
Mm-hmm. What else do you have from this game other than Jack Hoiberg?
Other than Jack Hoiberg
finding a home in the rotation. It's going to be big in March. At one point in the game when it was Zeb Jackson on Jack Hoiberg and Jack Hoiberg on Zeb Jackson, and I was looking at the calendar and seeing it was March 7th. So I did not see this coming, but
So I guess if you're Michigan, like, what do you make of where, like, say Eli Brooks is out for some extended period of time? Is there a direction you try to go? Is there something you want to explore? Like, I don't know. I don't really see it. Obviously, it's a bad thing, but
I mean, it is really troublesome if he is out for a while. It's not troublesome for the Big Ten tournament because really, who gives a shit, right? But if you're saying this is a March 16th issue, I mean, they're in trouble. If he is out, they are in trouble.
Like how would you, like 116 trouble, or like 8-9 trouble, or like where?
I would say they are 8-9 trouble. Yes, I would say that they are in 1 versus 8-9 trouble for sure.
Do you think, like, is there another option? Like, obviously, the option in the
this is a question I would ask you
is to play everyone 40 minutes and then basically, right? Like, you got to get, like, Zeb Jackson can't play 8 minutes.
No,
he can play like 3 or 4 minutes. Like, you can give him a shift, but I don't think he needs multiple shifts, right? Like, I think you have to minimize
half shift.
And in this case, it's a game that mattered, but it's not like your season's on the line. So it does make sense to try to get him some minutes, I think.
Yes,
but
I agree.
I don't think he's really ready. Like, you can just see the number of defensive breakdowns. And like, you had, I think, Johns and Zeb Jackson on the court for a pretty long time together.
Yeah, with Austin Davis for a stretch there.
So how are you going to get stops? That's what I'm saying. Like,
right.
I don't know. And I think that Michigan's bench, and now Michigan's bench is basically gone, but you're going to be force feeding minutes to Austin Davis, Brandon Johns, Zeb Jackson. I think that's like the scary part for this team in March. And I think like Hunter Dickinson's had some kind of foul trouble these last few games, and that just like Austin Davis
turnover trouble, and he's just had like trouble. He doesn't look comfortable with the ball.
Fed up. It's because I think Michigan State did a really good job. Like, he's catching it off his spots, and he's just not the same player if you play him to his strengths and you make him catch it a little further from the hoop. So I think that's credit to what they're doing defensively, but it clearly frustrates him, and he gets sped up when he's on the block. Again, it comes down to that's being stagnant, but again, he needs to play through it. Like, Austin Davis needs to play 8 to 10 minutes in the NCAA tournament, not 15. It sounds small, but if Hunter gets in foul trouble, go give Brandon Johns a shift at center, because he's not really giving you anything at the power forward, and he played really well at center on Thursday. So I think that
if any, at least he makes the other team do something different. You know?
He can create a mismatch. Like, it's something other than just like the upside of Austin Davis minutes is basically kind of maintaining the same game state, right? I don't really see him helping in a key spot beyond like, okay, we're right where we were. You're not going to get 5 stops in a row. You're not going to go on a big run. And it just sort of stagnates everything. So I think the biggest concern for Michigan in the postseason is, like, beyond Brooks' health, is how do you get the rotation kind of clicking to the point where you're getting good things out of them and you're playing everyone the right amount of minutes, because you don't want to go and end your season and say, well, man, we lost and Hunter Dickinson only played 22 minutes or something like that.
Right.
And then you're like, well, what the hell happened? Right. So that's what I think you got to figure out. And I mean, you better hope guys are ready to go a long time, because Michigan's strength is its starting lineup. And now you're down a guy potentially. That's a tough spot.
So do you think, like, Big Ten tournament, how much weight are you putting on these games in terms of like your comfort level in projection for the NCAA tournament based on the way that everyone was feeling right as recently as 8 to 10 days ago, you know?
What are you asking? Well, you got to break it down for me. You're saying projection level
do
for
you,
what?
Like, if they go right and say barely beat Michigan State in the first game and then lose the next day and don't look particularly good, like, what is your worry level? Or do you need to see this team play well in Indy to still like feel good about the NCAA tournament?
That's good.
I mean, they've 2 of their worst 3 games of the year are in their last 3 games.
Yeah, that's more like, it's not really about the Big Ten tournament. It's just, how do you reconcile?
You want to get right, maybe. Like, you can still use the Big Ten tournament to get right. That's kind of my point.
Yeah, and I don't know. Like, what do you make of this stretch, right? Like, Tuesday was a disaster. Thursday was just everyone feel great about yourself and pat yourself on the back and beat Michigan State and raise a banner and do this and senior night.
They didn't play that great in that game. Like, they played
they
really good for the last
28.
15 minutes. In the last 15 minutes, yeah.
But that was kind of the recipe. Like, it felt like a normal Michigan game we've seen all along.
I agree, but
then you play like shit
their
again.
level of play in that game was not what we've seen in some other games. It wasn't some light out classic performance like this team has shown. That's my only point. I agree with you though.
But what do you make of that? I don't know. I
think this stretch worries me a little bit. I don't think it's some total mirage. I think they've looked tight. And I'm not sure where it's stemming from. And now you take Eli Brooks out of it potentially, and I feel like a team that was starting to look tight gets tighter.
So I think you have to separate two things, right? Like the Eli Brooks thing, if he's out, like we don't know anything about his injury, right? But if he's out for significant NCAA tournament games, then yes, Michigan's floor is lower, Michigan's ceiling is lower. I think the Minnesota game, this game proves that he's incredibly impactful in the rotation. So that's one thing. But I think the other thing is just more the psyche of how this week goes and whether the Big Ten tournament matters. I think you can make a pretty compelling case either way. And I think that tells you that it really doesn't. Like people always say, oh, this team's hot, they're going to make a run. This team's not. Like Michigan in 2013, they blew the Big Ten regular season championship in the last game, got bounced by Wisconsin 2 games in, then went to the Final Four. Like you don't really know. Yeah. Michigan 2018 was the opposite, right? They were on a tear. They won the Big Ten tournament. And then like Michigan State has had years where they've won the Big Ten tournament, lost early, right? Like it's just, you don't really ever know. It's more going to come down to matchups and all that other stuff that actually matters. So I don't read too much into that. But would you like to play well? Yes. Would you like to at least like beat Michigan State or Maryland on Friday? Yes. Are you gonna feel bad if you lose on Saturday to Purdue and whatever? Like I don't know. Maybe. Do you think that's going to make or break the season? I don't really.
I think it'll make or break the season, but I don't know. Just I feel like when this team has like played well, it purrs, right? Like it has been such it's been such beautiful basketball when they play really well that when they're disjointed and it doesn't look good, it almost like looks significantly worse, if that makes any sense, you know? And it's one of those things where when you're playing that well, you almost and then you're not. You wonder, was like that time kind of captured in a bottle, like, or was that team never quite that good? You know what I mean?
Well, here's the thing: Michigan State. Who's the last team to go play at Michigan State and not look disjointed? Like,
I don't disagree with that.
So that's you got to give some credit where it's due, right? Like Indiana,
no doubt,
Ohio State,
like,
Illinois, they all went to East Lansing, got the first word out of every coach when they said is they got out physicaled, they got out toughed, and that's what's happening, right? Like you could go look at Chris Holtman's press conference, Juwan Howard's press conference. So there's a trend here. And that's probably more to do with it than anything else. I don't think Michigan just forgot how to play offensive basketball.
I don't disagree, but there's something to be said for the fact that like there can be scar tissue and residual damage from performances like that, where you just kind of lose your moxie, your mojo, whatever bullshit you want to call it, right? Where it can like, and then you try to recapture it and you're looking at yourself saying, what was the special sauce there? Like that's a thing where teams are just try to repurpose, refigure out whatever a way that they were playing and aren't quite able to find it again. And you can get knocked so far out of whack that you don't get it back. That you've seen teams you've seen that happen before to teams. So that'd be my concern with Michigan. I'm not about that level. I'm not ready to project Michigan losing in the second round of the NCAA tournament, you know.
But I just don't really see that as, I mean, this game, I think I think it has more to do with Eli Brooks than somehow forgetting your mojo or what, like anything like that. So I think that's what it is. I do think we should talk a little bit about Michigan State NCAA tournament. Like obviously they're in because we said all along, if they beat Michigan, they're in, but now you start getting into like what seed can they get up to, right? Where getting past talking about first four, you would think. They play Maryland on Thursday. The worry is you're going to mess around and play your way into the 8-9 game, which means you're probably going to see
Michigan for a fourth time.
No, Gonzaga or Baylor in that second round game, because you're looking at Illinois and Michigan as the other ones,
right?
Which would mean you're going to get dropped into a.
I don't know if I see them getting up to a 9. Do you?
No, I mean,
if you beat
the net is hurting them, like their overall net, but they're going to have way more quality wins, and I think the narrative is going to kind of shift here as far as how they're perceived when you go and beat 3 top 10 net teams at home, right? Like that's going to be a factor, and I don't think many other teams on those 8-9 seed lines are going to have that. The Maryland game will be key, because I think that would really, like at that point, they're going to be ahead of probably potentially like Rutgers and Maryland as far as Big Ten teams stand on the S curve, you would think, right? Hell, even Wisconsin. Like, is Wisconsin's resume that much better? No, Wisconsin's won. The last time they beat a team other than Nebraska or Northwestern was February 2nd, and that was Penn State. I mean, so I think you're going to see a closer look at some of this, and I do think you could see Michigan State get up to those lines. Like, it doesn't seem that insane.
That would be wild. So now we're going to go from wondering if they'd have to win their first game in the Big Ten to thinking that maybe they should lose it just to avoid the 8-9.
Well, no, I'm not saying, I would never say, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just wondering.
Like, I think that they very much look like a 10 seed.
You're acting like that means somehow that they couldn't be a 9 seed. This is like,
yeah. Like, but I think like on like an 11 seed becoming a 10 seed, not a 10 seed becoming a 9 seed. Does that make sense?
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, I think they're closer on that line than on the other line is my point. So if you're a 10, then you're playing what, a 6? So they'd be looking
7.
at that. Huh?
10-7.
10-7. So you'd be looking at like Florida, Loyola, Chicago, on your seed, like who you're playing,
You're playing. You said why would they play a 6? They play a 10 seed, man. Get your bracket map together. You're like you've had a long day.
So you'd be looking at games like Tennessee, Florida State, BYU, Clemson, Florida, Loyola, Chicago.
Here's the thing about
UConn,
a 10-7 game.
All winnable.
The 10 seeds are usually moving up, and 7 seeds are usually moving down.
Good point. That's
and that's what you get. Like, I feel like those 8-9 games are a lot like that, right?
Yeah.
Like you'll have the one team that was good earlier, and then it's just been slowly falling down the S curve. And then, so that'll be interesting. I just can't really wrap my head around.
You know, they're going to get Loyola Chicago.
Is Michigan State playing well or just winning, right? Like,
so did you see my tweet earlier?
No, but I did. I think you tweet something about the adjusted efficiency.
Yeah.
Because I mentioned those at some point too. Yeah.
So since in this span that they're 5-2 with 3 wins against top 5 teams, whatever, they are 50th in adjusted defense, 70th in adjusted offense, and 40th overall. Like, this is not some team that has just completely reversed course and is now changing or playing lights out basketball and blah, blah, blah. They are very much, it seems like, fist fighting their way through games and finding wins. And I don't know. And I know this comes off as like trying to like discount a team or something like that, but like, I don't know if a combination of catching teams on the right day, playing them the right way, right? Good bounces here and there, but like they're not playing that great, and they've won these games, and it's a total credit to Michigan State. I'm not trying to discount this, but you can say what you want about how efficiency ratings go, but going 5-2 with the wins that Michigan State has had and being 40th in adjusted efficiency stats in that time span is like, you would know way better than me, but that seems improbable to me that this could be possible.
Yeah,
numbers wise.
A big part of that is they lost by close to 20 at Maryland and Michigan.
That drags it down, but not that. I mean, but shit.
But you're efficient. It doesn't make sense. I know, and it's got to be hard to do. But it means you're basically, when you lose big. When you win small, and that kind of makes it happen. But that just brings me back to, like, you go back and look, and we talked about those games Michigan State could have won earlier in the year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this could be a team with a winning conference record pretty easily, but at the same time, they've been outscored. Like, the Big Ten's over, and they've been outscored by 8 points per 100 possessions in the Big Ten. That's, like, pretty bad. Like, usually,
where's that rank in the league?
I don't have the full numbers up. Let me see. It basically would be like 11th.
Which is crazy.
Which usually, if you see a bubble team, this is like the Northwestern, right? Remember when Northwestern made the tournament, won a game, and everyone lost their everything? Like, the one,
you can
the
say
only
shit.
Yeah. So when that happened, like, I always like to say a team that was outscored in conference play was probably a bit lucky and isn't going to be this breakout team everyone thinks they're going to be the next year just because they won a tournament game.
That's a Burkhart special.
That is
every preseason.
So usually that's like they got outscored by like 2 or 3 points per 100 possessions. Like 8 is a really low efficiency margin, and there are a lot of bad losses on the record, but it's crazy to see, and it's hard to really figure out because there are games they lost close that they really should have won, and, like, I don't know. So I just can't really put back together. It just seems to me they figured out how to win in key spots, and that basically comes down to the guy at the end of the bench, in my opinion.
I mean, what would you pay to be in the room when the committee gets to Michigan State? And you've got really nothing in the non-conference, right? You've got a win over Duke that really means little to nothing, Notre Dame, whatever. You've got losses by 30 twice, 25, 19, 18, 17, 14, and 10. That means not like non-competitive losses, right? And then you've got this bizarre record. You've got 3 wins over these teams in the last 2 weeks. Like, this will be one of the all-time strangest resumes that you can come up with.
Yeah. So the good thing is, like, all that stuff, like the bad losses, is why Michigan State has a low net ranking. Mm-hmm. But net ranking isn't really used to grade teams. It's used to grade teams' wins. So
they'll Colgate that.
What do you mean?
Isn't Colgate, like, that's been the joke of the net all year? That's all.
But it's used, so that doesn't mean Colgate's good. It means teams that beat Colgate get bonus points, right? So that's the thing. So Michigan State, all the teams in the Big Ten that have artificially high net rankings, like Maryland and Wisconsin, Michigan State benefits from that, right? So, like, that's this weird conundrum where you can say, well, Michigan State is a crappy net, but they're going to have a hell of a resume based on those wins against high-ranked net teams. Like, what, you know what I mean? So that's what it comes down to. And so that, in a weird way, works out for them. And I don't know. It is a weird resume, but I feel like it's gonna. I mean, what are they? 5-9 against in Q1 games. 9-11 in Q1 and 2 games combined. Those are pretty good numbers, right? Like, those are better than most, especially because they have a lot of those. They call them like Q1A, which are the top 25 or top 15 or whatever, like the good wins. So I don't know. It's a great resume, and it's a hell of a turnaround based on where this thing stood. Like, what, after that Iowa loss, or even after either Iowa loss.
Sorry, I'm responding to my boss.
Tell him you got bigger priorities, man. Anything else left on Michigan State from your point of view?
I'll be really curious what the rest of this month holds for them, because it is going to be fascinating. You know, I rattled off some of those teams. Someone is going to be sitting there feeling like they have a decent seed and is going to see Michigan State pop up and then find out that Michigan State beat 3 top 10 teams in the last 2 weeks of the year, and is just going to be absolutely livid with the matchup. And then they're going to hear from people from like us, where we're just going to be scratching our heads, being like, I don't know if Michigan State's that good. You know what I mean? Like, I just hope they get matched up with like a good power conference team. It'll be real bullshit if they get paired up with Loyola Chicago or some mid-major.
Why is that bullshit?
I don't
I don't understand. Loyola's good. Loyola's 9th in KenPom. Why are you hating on Loyola?
No. Like, I feel like Loyola shouldn't have to deal with playing Michigan State in the first round.
I feel like Loyola would match up well with Michigan State.
I'm not going into the matchup.
I'm just confused by your take. You're going to start putting someone in Ohio State jerseys on me, and then I'm not going to know what to do.
Like, Michigan State as this blue blood program coming off these monster wins is going to be the most dangerous seed of whatever line they're on in theory. And if they're paired up, I don't know, maybe Loyola Chicago wants to
Loyola, like, here's the thing.
The best team.
You're saying this, but if you really think about it, Michigan State will probably be, you're really doing a number on this bourbon over here. But Loyola will probably be the dangerous team. People like me will say on a similar seed line, because they'll be a top 10 KenPom team that'll be a low seed, and everyone will be buying into Michigan State, who will probably be overseeded based on their KenPom rank, which is pretty low, right? So like, it's going to be a weird take if you have a matchup like that. Speaking of 8-9 games, should we go over the Big Ten tournament, talk a little bit about Michigan State, Maryland?
Yes.
Start with that, because that's the game we have. That
will lead into what would be somehow a third game between Michigan and Michigan State. Do we feel like it's running it back from the last game, or has Michigan State shown you anything that dramatically different where you don't feel that way?
There's two things at play. One, it seems like Maryland thought the season was over when it beat Michigan State by 18 at home. They turned around and lost to Northwestern and Penn State to wrap the season. Not great, boys. Like, they seem like now all of a sudden they're probably on the bubble, and that's the scary part.
That was a hypothetical that I threw out there that you said was an impossible scenario.
All right, well, Turgeon never ceases to amaze.
The man with the bourbon knows a thing or two about what about Mark Turgeon.
So, but the trouble for Michigan State now is, like, Maryland's gonna, like,
they need
this game, right? And that's that's a scary spot. I mean, they completely choked that Penn State game. They were up big for most of the second half. They were up 50-36, and then they ended up losing. They gave up an 11-0 run and a 15-2 run in the last 10 minutes of the game. Your boy Seth Lundy probably got a lot of preseason podcast hype from you. He finally put a big game together on Maryland. But anyways, back to Maryland. Do you think the Michigan State Maryland game before was a matchup spot where Michigan State was playing a lot of games and not a lot of time? Maryland had that week off, or do you think Maryland's a tough matchup?
I do think it's a tough defensive matchup because of Maryland's size. I don't think that was something that was dependent on circumstances. The fact that Maryland basically plays like 6'6" across the board with athletic guys who are pretty quick is not ideal for Michigan State. The nature of that game, though, being 73-55, like, it wasn't Michigan State was never really in it. It was just a really ugly game. I think it was wasn't that like 11-0 early?
Yeah, like, I think they scored the first 11 or something.
Jumped right out, and it was never a game. Like, I think a lot of that was a byproduct of Michigan State playing a shit ton of games, Maryland not playing games. One team had legs, one team didn't, and it was an early tip in the day. Both things are true in that instance, I think.
Do you think Michigan State what's Michigan State's mentality going into the Big Ten tournament? Is it like, we did it? Because, like, we just saw what happens when you come back from a we did it spot.
Good point. Yep.
And there was a pretty we did it night all around today, I would say, at Michigan State. Yeah. And it should have been, right? Like,
Yes.
it was basically impossible a month ago, and now it's happening, and credit deserved. But it was the same thing we saw with Michigan, where you come off a spot like that. It's very different than you come off a very humbling spot, like losing at home to Penn State on the last day of the season. So that's an interesting kind of, you never know with these Big Ten tournament games, right? It's going to be the first game of the day. It's when the whole season ended a year ago. It's just like a weird spot all around in many ways. So that's a hard part to kind of parse out as far as it goes. And then Maryland's also really dependent on 3-point shooting. So you just kind of have the luck of the draw all around in that sense as well.
Yeah. I mean, the desperation element, one team's going to be more desperate than the other. And you kind of saw that in the last two Michigan State games where Michigan was desperate to make sure it wrapped up the Big Ten championship in that game, right? Mm-hmm. And in this game, Michigan State was desperate to lock up its NCAA tournament chances. So I agree. And I don't think Michigan State having an opportunity to play Michigan for a third time, I don't think is any level of huge motivation of let's get to the next game and beat those guys again. I feel like they did the job in this today by beating them. You know what I mean? Whereas if you'd lost twice, as much as it would be, you have to beat Maryland to get in the tournament, it would also be fuck that team, let's get back and play them and beat that team. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I don't think there's much of that, but I think the much bigger issue is the matchup situation of Michigan State going back over that first matchup. And look, I mean, this coaching staff is as good as there is at, I feel like, unpacking what went wrong the first time and figuring some things out and delivering it to their guys in, a very comprehensive manner. And in this case, the idea that Maryland will be able to shoot that well and create as much difficulty as Michigan State had the first time just running offense, I don't know about that. Mm-hmm. Everything went well for Maryland in that game.
Yeah, and so these two teams are both better on defense and offense, right? This is the 11th offense against the 13th offense in the Big Ten. So you have some of that perspective. Just like I expect it'll kind of be an ugly game. It's going to be the first game. Both teams are playing because it's in Lucas Oil, right? So you're playing in a football stadium. That can be a little weird. So it's just going to be, it's going to be the kind of game we've seen Michigan State play over and over again. Even if Maryland's a bad matchup for Michigan State, I know they did have that 12-0 run in that game, but I don't see them just kind of running away with it. I think it's going to be close, competitive, and it'll come down to who can execute late. And I'd probably put my money on Aaron Henry over Aaron Wiggins. So probably Michigan State in that spot.
What is your Big Ten tournament championship matchup?
I got to pull up the bracket. I'll tell you who's winning it right now. Illinois, and
I was about to say
it's done. It's just they're so just angry at this entire situation. There's only one way this ends, right? You've seen this narrative before. I mean, the only thing I could see is if this is my scenario. Illinois gets to plays through, but then Michigan doesn't make the final, and they're just let down and they lose to Purdue or someone like that. I could see that. I could see. So I'll go with, here's my picks. Purdue, Illinois, but I'll take Illinois to win. I don't even like Purdue. Why am I picking Purdue? Do you think Michigan makes a run? I feel like Michigan might just kind of take the week off, to a sense. I think Michigan will be happy with a get-right game against Michigan State, and then whatever, let's get right for the tournament. But I don't know. I could see it going either way.
I'm not particularly feeling Michigan, but the two games we've seen them play without Eli Brooks have just been so bad, Mm-hmm. And the first one, you kind of give them a pass when you lose them in the game, right? But like the Minnesota game, they practiced without him. They knew it wasn't going to play, and that's still what they did, and so on and so forth. I don't even remember the last Purdue Michigan game. Does Purdue definitely get by Ohio State?
No,
Ohio State needs to find something here soon because they have right now. Ohio State has lost to Purdue and first round loss to a lower seed written all over them.
Yeah, they don't play any defense. I've been selling Ohio State for a while. I think that the good, like, if Michigan can figure it out and beat Michigan State, like Purdue, Ohio State, like the top half of the bracket isn't great, right? I think you would like, I don't know. I don't know. I've just looked at these. I just can't wait for the NCAA tournament, man. I'm like, how are we still talking about these same 14 teams? Like, I just have things I hate about every team. Like, you're going to make me watch Indiana Rutgers on Thursday night.
That's right. And you will.
I will. And I mean, it's just, how are we I just think everyone gets, you see Greg Gard going after the refs and the Brad Davison hook and holds. Like, I just think everyone's just tired of each other.
This was like people that don't believe in narratives can today got your medicine, because this was like the quintessential Big Ten narrative day. It checked every box. You had Brad Davison with a hook and hold in the last couple minutes of a game, refereed by Bo Borowski. You had Michigan State, pulling a season-saving performance out of its ass and beating Michigan, and Izzo leaving the court in tears. Like, all the boxes being checked.
All right,
Fran yelling at everyone.
All right, hold on. Here's the new task. We're going to look at the Big Ten tournament bracket. We have to pick a title pick from each that starts on each day.
Explain.
So my Wednesday title pick, Penn State. Like the team that can make a run that enters the tournament on each day. So
okay.
You got me? Okay. So like Penn State has a real chance to make a run, I would say. I think they're better than Nebraska. Wisconsin has been terrible for months.
Yeah.
Iowa, have they ever won a game in the Big Ten tournament? I feel like they're always going home early. All of a sudden, you got to play one game to make. I mean, you never say never. So, I think they're my team on Wednesday to make a run. I'm not going to make you try to sell Nebraska, Minnesota, or Northwestern to make a run.
I will come up with a Minnesota argument just for the shit of it. Marcus Carr's probably a top player in the league. If you've been at the barn and you've been at Lucas Oil, both are very airy,
They've lost.
Maybe Minnesota can, although they're losing at home now too.
They've lost 7 games in a row. They're cooked.
Do they lose to Northwestern?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
Northwestern, 3-game winning streak to start the season, 3-game winning streak to end the season. I mean, this is their time. I mean, they've at least proven they can beat some of these teams.
Let's get to March 11th. This will be a little easier. So, team that can make a run that is entering the tournament on March 11th.
You can take your first pick.
I'll say.
And we both just completely shit talked Ohio State, so don't pick them.
Don't like any of these. Go ahead. You have to say Michigan State.
There you go.
You have to say Michigan State. I mean, the wins that they just rattled off, could they do four games in 4 days? That's a lot. Could they do 3 wins in 3 days?
They could.
Sure.
I mean,
yeah. I'll go. That. They could beat Michigan, beat Purdue, and get in. They already beat Purdue once.
And really, twice.
Really, twice, right.
I'll go with Rutgers.
Oh,
I think Indiana is so bad that I have a built-in win to start here with my Rutgers pick. So I like.
And then just in Illinois, just eat shit, bad first day performance. We've seen that before.
Do we have opinions on this Illinois thing? Like, did you see Juwan Howard get asked about it today?
I wasn't on his call, actually. What did he say?
He said he wasn't going to get dragged into any bulletin board material shit. And then he proceeded to like throw like 5 bulletin board material quotes out.
Well, what did he say?
He said his teams worked really hard. They earned it. They're the Big Ten champs. Basically said that Illinois didn't win, which is accurate.
More importantly, who asked the question?
We can skip that part. But so that happened.
Okay.
And I saw Illinois players all tweeting out ring emojis and pictures of Trent Frazier holding up a Big Ten champion sign.
I saw Trent Frazier with the sign.
So what's your take? All right, let's hear your take first.
I feel terrible for Illinois because it's not right. It's not right, okay? At the same time, I don't know how else you can measure this thing other than winning percentage. And at the time, I think if roles were reversed...
Hey, Brad Underwood's got some for you. Total wins.
I think if roles were reversed, Illinois would be saying the same thing. And look, and the whole weird underlying thing of this is the whole there's a lot of people making a lot of noise that are like like COVID seriousness. Like that's a really weird part of this conversation. Okay, we can both acknowledge that like a lot of the heat that Michigan's getting is from like people that are like, COVID's bullshit in the first place. Why did you do this? Your state and your school are a bunch of pansies, and that's why this all happened. You're ducking games, right? Like, let's not bullshit it. That is what a lot of this is, okay? I'm not saying that's from Illinois' like actual program, but in terms of
the fan,
in terms of the echo
Twitter
chamber
engagement.
of social media, whatever, that is there. I don't know how you can create the standings in these situations without just going by winning percentage. And if it sucks for Illinois and the dudes on that team that this is the way it worked out, but I just don't know how else you crown a champion. What do you got?
Yeah, it's just really tough because this was the one disaster scenario where it's so close that you really have a case. Like, I don't think they would be wrong to say they were co-champions, but there's also a sheet of paper that says the rules. It's going to be decided on winning percentage. Like, that is what it is, right? You can't really change that. The math is the math. And you also like maybe today's game potentially goes different if Michigan is playing knowing it needs to win the Big Ten, right? It's a little different than knowing you need to know to make it sound like there won't be any debate. Like, they don't give a shit what Illinois players think about it. You know what I mean?
And hey, listen, Illinois, maybe don't let up 91 points to Rutgers, which is impossible. Okay? Like, right? All the games matter. And the fact that Illinois
all the games matter except the ones that aren't played, Brendan.
But the fact that Illinois beat, Michigan on March 2nd, that game means just as much as the game against Rutgers on December 20th. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a tough situation all around. It could be
lost.
I lost your signal.
I said Illinois lost 2 home games back to back in January. Like, acting as if this Illinois team has just been like steamrolling through the Big Ten is just not accurate. Indiana took them to overtime. Nebraska took them to overtime. They lost 2 home games back to back. They lost at Rutgers. Like, I understand that at times this team has been phenomenal. And I mean, I love this Illinois team. Like, I think they have absolute Final Four potential. I love the characters on the team. Like, I think it's a great mix. But
But to
like you
finish
said,
a game behind in the loss column and 3 games more played is a tough way to go out with the head-to-head win. That's anyone would be mad if they were in Illinois' shoes, right? Like that sucks.
And like the Michigan fans that are trying to be high and mighty about this thing, like Michigan fans would be breaking their
the internet
shit
completely.
On this.
I agree.
Completely.
It would be a rigged
just sucks.
championship.
It just sucks. Right.
And so here's the thing. Though. If it would have been weird if Michigan didn't play, Michigan did play the games against better teams. And the games they didn't play are Northwestern, Penn State, and Indiana,
and it played every team once, at least.
But I think the fact that if they played those 3 games, you would look at it and probably say they might lose one. And that's the thing. Sure. If it was 2 games, you would say, oh, there's no chance, right? If Michigan finished 15-2, you'll say, okay, you don't really have a case.
The biggest problem in the whole thing is that the women's team played that day. The men's team didn't against Illinois. That happened.
It's rigged, Brendan.
I guess it's rigged. I don't know. I'm not here to defend Michigan. I don't give a shit. People can attack them all they want, I mean, but that's really what it boils down to. If they had played Illinois that game and they had gotten to 18 games, it would be a little bit of a different argument. But they didn't play that game. The women's team played that day. That happened. No?
Yeah, that happened. Michigan could have made up another game. Based on the schedule everyone else in the conference played.
Correct.
There's at least room for one more game. You could say even 2 more games. Michigan didn't need to, and the rules are the rules. The teams that did make up a lot of games had reason to, right? Michigan State, can talk about all the games they played and the COVID schedule. They needed.
Tom Izzo will tell you about all the games that he played if you wanted to.
They needed to play all those games, right? That's part of the equation. Is if you're on the ball. We said this a month ago. The only thing a bubble team wants is more games on the schedule, and
yes,
so that helped them in a way. I know that they were tired, and it's too many games for players to play, and I think everyone will agree that's bullshit. But in the scope of things, that helped them. So I don't know. It's a tough spot all around. I think the Big Ten dropped the ball by not getting more games in December. I think it could have been a different situation.
But I mean, shit. They still got basically to the finish line.
They dropped 4 games, and 3 of them were Michigan games.
3 of them were Michigan games that were shut down by the state due to a COVID variant that wasn't even a positive test within the program.
But look.
Yeah, you can say the December thing. That's fine. But the plan worked. They got it done, right?
Yeah, that's fair. I just think Michigan playing 1 game in 20 days in December was a mistake. It didn't make sense then. It didn't make sense now. And the fact that Michigan ended up in a situation like this kind of speaks to how that went wrong, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You put 2 games in there. You played Northwestern or whoever in those December doldrum spots. All of a sudden you wouldn't have had Michigan's schedule was incredibly backloaded all the time. And the fact that it was all national TV games every week made it really hard, I think, to make adjustments, right? Nebraska, you can just move those games around whenever you want because they're only on Big Ten Network. So you just put it on. Michigan, every weekend they had a national game. Every weekday it was ESPN, right? I think that made it a lot more complicated in a way that maybe we don't talk about, right? So,
right.
I still I will say the way Illinois' players have used it as motivation, that's good coaching. I think you can't knock that in any sense because those dudes were ready to go on whatever day it was, Tuesday at Michigan, and they're going to be ready to go in the Big Ten tournament because that's proving ground time, right? I mean, they're going to be ready. I have no doubt about that. And now look, they will lose the first game just because we were so confident. So what are you going to do?
Man. I mean, I do like the fact that the Big Ten tournament just in a tournament with no fans and not the normal, there will be
there are fans,
but not the same vibe we're used to, right? There's there's a little gasoline there. If you can get to a Michigan-Illinois championship game, shit, that is going to be like 2 1 seeds going at it, right? No, like, well, they're not. I mean, there's no question about it. There would be 2 1 seeds going at it. Like, what a monster game that would be.
Yeah,
while I'm covering the final round at Sawgrass.
That's what a Big Ten tournament final is, though. I mean, think about the last Big Ten tournament final was that Michigan State game. That game had all the gasoline on it, right? I mean, so
that was the semifinals, wasn't it? The one in the Garden?
No. The one in Chicago, where Michigan State
third
in a row, right? Like, it's kind of a similar, like, that was Michigan, like, oh, we need to get back. And then that was the game that kind of followed the same script as all those games between those two teams that year, right? So, I mean, that's what you hope for. I just don't, I can't tell if, I think all these teams will be very well served to have a few days off before the Big Ten tournament, because I feel like over the last couple weeks, the quality of play in the Big Ten is kind of just shifted down. There have been a couple close games, but a few more blowouts. It just feels like everyone's getting a little burnt out. So,
do you feel, last thing on the Michigan-Illinois thing, do you feel like this is kind of being cooked up by Illinois, or do you think like it's like a legitimate, like, this is bullshit?
I think everyone thinks it's bullshit, rightfully, in a sense, but I also think it's being used completely as a motivation tactic. I mean, if you look at how they came into that game at Michigan, I think absolutely. You don't?
No.
I don't think that means it's cooked up. I just think it's being emphasized.
It's but like, like Michigan, like the Illinois is leaning into this thing for sure, right? I mean,
I don't think Michigan gives a shit.
Players running off the court. Well, now they better.
Well, yeah, Michigan gives a shit because they got punked in their building.
If you rain confetti down on your court and are out there doing snow angels, running around with Big Ten championship signs, and then 2 days later, another team is running around with Big Ten champion signs.
It was a whiteboard, right?
I don't know. I haven't seen it.
It looks like a whiteboard when they just drew. It's not like they had their own, it's not like a real.
That would have been amazing if they had like the full blown big cardboard sign.
It looked like a whiteboard.
That'd have been nice. They should have. You know what Illinois should have done was T-shirts.
Yeah, I mean, they can do whatever they want. No one's stopping them. They just aren't going to have a trophy to speak for. I think that there's Michigan kind of like, I don't think Michigan brought that fire because they didn't know that Illinois was like feeling wrong like that. But now they're going to bring the fire because they just got destroyed on their home floor, right? So if you got that rematch, but I'm guessing we don't. I'm not feeling that rematch in the Big Ten title. So we'll see.
It'd be too perfect, really.
It would.
No, it'll be what? Purdue versus like Iowa. No one's going to give two shits.
It's not going to be Iowa.
All right. Who's your pick? You said Penn State. We'll go Purdue, Penn State.
Oh, baby. Penn State's sneaky.
If Penn State made it to the Big Ten championship game, they wouldn't have any argument, right?
To get in?
With wins over Wisconsin, Iowa.
Would they even have a winning record?
I don't know. But if you beat Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, they would have more quad one wins, certainly, than any other team that gets left out of the tournament.
I don't know. I mean, they've done just enough to make it interesting.
Look at you. I can see. I can see the wheels spinning over there.
Seth Lundy's going to start dropping 30 bombs every night. 31 points, 5 of 8 from 3. He had hit.
All right. We are in the Seth Lundy season.
Seth Lundy is
back. That means we are at the end of the podcast. If we're at Seth Lundy season stats, it is quarter of 1 in the morning. I have a flight tomorrow, and Dylan, you have a flight tomorrow.
Yeah, busy days.
All right. Well, this was probably a big waste of time, but we appreciate everyone listening. Wait, did you have another point?
No.
Do you want to get into Isaiah Brockington or something?
Oh, no. We'll get into that we're going to bring you off the golf course to do an emergency podcast when Penn State makes the tournament.
Oh, I love this. I love that. All right. Well, we appreciate everyone listening. Subscribe to The Athletic. We didn't even do the pitch up front, so now you better do it. Subscribe to The Athletic. Subscribe to UM Hoops. Leave us a review in the iTunes store. And be sure, of course, to tip your bartenders and servers.